Shalom, shalom. This is Sister Lala here with another video. I'm going to ask you just off the jump to please be patient and bear with me as I try to get through this video. I'm actually going to be talking about my experiences and in more detail with John Tatum. And the reason for this video is to give you more clarity and to give you an even greater understanding of why we are here where we are today with this whole situation, why he's so bitter, why he's so jealous and envious of Pastor Dal, and why they are going so hard to expose Pastor Dal for this person that he clearly isn't. So I tried to do this video on YouTube. I was only able to record about 5 minutes at a time, so I just downloaded an app to get it all done. I still have to do it in clips, so if the video cuts out, you'll know why. So I guess I will start by explaining a little bit more in detail of how I met he's not a pastor, how I met Tatum, and who exactly I was to him. Because in my previous videos, I did talk about how we were close, how I knew him very well, and that's because I am his ex-wife. You hear Pastor Dal talk a lot about how he dealt treacherously with an individual, with his wives, and I am that person, and I'm here to give you my side of the story. It's not just a story though. This is all true. I have the receipts in the form of text messages, Facebook messages, emails. I have an actual receipt for all the money that I spent on him, and eyewitness accounts and a couple of witnesses. So, and this isn't coming from a bitter place. I'm actually in a very good place spiritually. I'm in a very good place than when I was about a year ago, because this all happened, I'm gonna say, around late October, early November. So almost a whole year later, I'm just in a different place. I don't dwell on it, but I felt that it was needful to come out with this information, especially with all that's going on right now and the wickedness that's rising up within these false witnesses like Tatum, like whoever else that guy's name is that I don't know. What is it? I don't even remember his name. That's how irrelevant he is to me. But I'm just going to touch on all of that, and that's my intro to this whole thing. But anywho, I met Tatum because I was searching for Pastor Dal. I had come across a bunch of his videos on YouTube. I shared them with my brother. My brothers, two of my brothers, and we were all looking for Pastor Dal because we had questions. We came out of a cult. There was a lot of stuff that we had been taught that was wrong. We had just found out that we were Hebrews. We were believing that we were Gentiles like everybody else. And I wrote Pastor Dal twice. I wrote him 2 emails, and then I sent him a Facebook message. I wasn't aware that he replies on Shabbat service. I didn't even know he held Shabbat services. I was only watching the YouTube videos that would pop up on my feed, or the next video that would pop up after that one had ended. So I ended up adding a bunch of people on Facebook that said that they were part of Straightway or had Straightway in their name, and Tatum just so happened to be one of them. I befriended a lot of people, and I sent a couple of messages out. I specifically sent one to him because I remember seeing him in a video. I said, hey, I've been searching for Pastor Dal. I'm trying to get in touch with him. I have some questions. Can you help a sister out? Later to find out he took that as me flirting with him. Go figure. So he gets in my inbox, of course, and he gives me his number. He introduces himself as a pastor of Straightway, and says that Pastor Dal's really busy, but that's what they were there for. They have several pastors and elders for the people. So I was okay with that, as long as I got in touch with somebody who was affiliated, who knew Straightway, who walked that walk and was on that path. That's who I needed to speak to. So I wasn't upset that I wasn't in touch with Pastor Dal, because I thought I was getting a representation of him. So I talked to him on the phone. My brothers talked to him, well, one of my brothers talked to him on the phone. The other one wasn't too excited because he specifically wanted to speak with Pastor Dal. But the conversation instantly turned when he started asking me personal questions about myself. he began to ask me about my past, about past relationships, and I gave him all the details. I'm thinking this guy here wants to help me, so that's exactly what I started doing. I gave him the whole story of my life pretty much. I was just so grateful that there was somebody there who was willing to listen and to give me guidance on why I am in the position that I am in, from the way that I was brought up all the way up until now. So I didn't leave anything out. If he asked, I answered. But in return, instead of actually helping me and giving me counsel, he then starts telling me about his life. He tells me about his wife and how she's in rebellion, how he has put her away and is in the process of giving her a divorce. He went down a list of her being rebellious. She was very wicked. She was disobedient. She didn't cook. She didn't clean. She wasn't a keeper at home. She didn't support him as being her head. She wore makeup. She wore jewelry. She wouldn't cover her head. She wore pants, and just anything that a Hebrew man walking in the faith runs the opposite direction from. She was that. So he eventually ended up telling me that it was the Father's doing of me not being able to get in touch with Pastor Dow, and for me getting in touch with him, and how the Father knows that I needed a covering. He knew that Tatum needed a wife because of his situation, and that he put me in his scope, and how he prayed for an Esther because he was currently dealing with the Vashti, and I was very early in coined as his Esther. I even changed my Facebook name eventually. Anywho, so he starts going into telling me what his plans were. He made it seem as if he was gonna as he was saying that the Father was leading him to move to Utah because the land out here is fairly priced and it's not in a big city. So he said that he wanted to come out and visit. He wanted to come check me out, and he wanted to spy out the land. Oh, and he can talk to my brothers in person. And then we all ended up getting baptized when he came. But that's what he told me. He said he wanted to leave the city. And I heard Pastor talk about this a lot, about coming out of the city. So that was another reason why I wanted to get in touch with him. But he had talked about that and made it seem like this was all falling into his lap at the Father's doing because he was such a faithful servant. And so I fell for it. I'm not going to say I fell for it. Being as naive as I was and just so desperate to find out what's going on in this world and seeking guidance, because I had been on my own. I had been under false leaders before. I had been in relationships that were not good for me. So to find somebody who is telling me that the Father is doing this, I don't know the Father, by the way. Had no idea who he was, or what his plans were for me. So when this pastor is telling me this, I ate it up with a spoon. I did have my hesitations, but I was told that those hesitations were the devil. It was him trying to stop me from receiving these blessings. So we met, and to my shame, we consummated our marriage the day we met, pretty much. And he told me, I asked him, I was like, have you talked to Pastor Dow about me? Have you told him who I was? And Pastor even called him while he was out here, and he sent me out from where I was to give them space to talk, and I didn't mind doing that. So I left and I came back, and he told me that he told Pastor about me. Come to find out later, that was a lie. But anywho, that whole trip, there was something that just didn't feel right. There was something within me that was just in disagreement with the whole situation, but I didn't know what voice that was. I thought that was just me being scared to receive whatever it was that the Father had for me. So in spite of feeling that way, and mind you, this trip, I paid for the Airbnb room. I paid for all the groceries. I cooked all the food. I drove the car from Ogden all the way to Salt Lake City. It's a 45 to 50 minute drive. I went back and forth. I did all of that. I did everything that I was supposed to do, or at least that I thought that I was supposed to do. I think he bought me a pair of shoes. It's probably the most he's ever done. But anywho, that's another story that I'm going to get into later. So after this happens, he then swears me to secrecy. I am not to tell anybody. I'm not to tell my brothers. I'm not to tell anybody in his church. Because after he talked to us and he came out here, my brother Mian actually tried to listen to the Shabbat service. When he found out that they did Shabbat service on Saturday, my brother tried to watch Pastor Dow, but then Tatum was telling us that his service is at the same time and that we should watch his. So my brother tried to do both. He was trying to go back and forth to different rooms and it just didn't work. So Tatum told us to watch his service. So we started doing that, and then we actually officially asked him to be my brothers had asked him, I don't think Jules did, but Mian asked him if he can be our pastor, and he said yes. So we were believing that we were supposed to be listening to him and not Pastor. Little did we know that everybody, even Pastor Corey and all the elders and everybody, listens to Straightway's service first in Tennessee, Pastor Dow, and then they do their thing after. Had no idea. But Tatum was doing his service at the same time, and he was preaching the same message every Shabbat. It was always about Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, or the Jezebel spirit. That's all he ever talked about. Oh, and slavery sometimes. He would get some YouTube videos, and to sit on his ass, he would put the video on so he didn't have to preach anymore. But that's about all his services consisted of. And when I was able to watch the Straightway services after they were posted, I just noticed that they were 1,000 times different. And he had then told me that I noticed he would always make comments about Pastor Dowell, like, not that he was in competition with him. It almost seemed like he was trying to be like Pastor Dowell, even from the way he talked to the way that he would try to preach. It was a pathetic attempt. I didn't really understand that at the time, but when you look back at it, all of his little catchphrases, he says everything that Pastor Dowell says, and he says it at the wrong time, so it was not with the same effect. It didn't have the same effect on us as it does when Pastor does it. But he would ask me questions that indicated that he was definitely jealous of Pastor Dow. He would ask me, oh, you're not attracted to men that look like that, are you? Or you're not interested in him. Because I had told him once that I had had a dream about Pastor Dow. It had nothing to do with anything sexual, but that he was like a father figure in my dream. And when I told him that, I'm like, no, I don't look at him like that. Like, that's not even who I am. But it came up more than once for sure. And then when we actually got to the land, he asked me that question again, and I didn't give him an answer. What I asked was, why do you ask me things like that? I didn't understand where it was coming from. Just to expound a little bit more about his jealousy and envy for this man, he got so upset when one of the brothers who was new that the crispy brother Hugh brought in, Brother Brandon, when he first came in, Brandon didn't want Tatum to baptize him. He wanted Pastor Dow to do it. And he was very adamant about it. And so after the brother left that day, Tatum called me to vent and was really upset about it. Like, why would you want Pastor to do it and not me? Like, who is Pastor? He would even tell me and remind me, like, do you realize that Pastor Dow would have never sat with you and talked to you the way that I have? Do you realize that he would have never gave you counsel the way that I took the time to give you counsel? And at that time, I never really had a response to him. I would just be in agreement, like, no, I didn't realize that, but, you know, I'm thankful. But when I really look back at it, that's probably wise. The things that I shared with that man should have been shared with a sister, should have been shared with a mother, not bearing your soul and telling a man who's going through marital problems all your encounters or the things that you have struggled with or stories about your life that he has no business in knowing. So I would like to imagine that if Pastor Dow would have talked to me, that he would have directed me to the sisters instead of listening and wasting hours hearing me out on things that he had no business in knowing. So just food for thought for you, Tatum, to think back on that, because that was just so unwise of you. But anywho, during this time of being with this man, another point that I wanted to get into is that he was not a provider for me. I'm learning as I'm watching Straightway and I'm starting to listen to Sister that a husband, what he's charged to do. And I just came into this whole thing so ignorant without knowing anything that it was easy for him. I was an easy mark. It was easy for him to take advantage of me the way that he did, because I didn't know that a husband was supposed to be in charge and provide a roof over my head. was supposed to make sure that I had groceries or that I was clothed and that I had no want for anything or need for anything. And he didn't do that. On the other hand, though, and I have the receipts, I sent this man over $1,300. And I can honestly say this, he probably spent all together on me, including the pair of shoes that he bought me, about $100. And that's being generous. I asked if I could send Pastor Dow offerings, and he said no. Pastor would want you to send that offering to whoever is feeding you. And I said, but I do send you offerings. I send you offerings every paycheck. But I also get fed by Pastor Dow. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even be in contact with you. He was like, well, Pastor Dow would still want you to give it to wherever you're being fed the most. So make sure you double down on my offering. Those were his words. And even when it came to us driving down to the feast, when we went down to Tennessee, I flew to Chicago, and that's one of the worst experiences. And that was part of the straw that was about to break this camel's back. But when I flew to Chicago, we drove to Tennessee, and I have brought extra money with me because I listened to the broadcast for Sister to Sister, and they have a list of things that they ask the sisters if they could bring with them. So I was going to bring a couple of them because I was just so happy to finally get to go and meet them. And on our road trip, and before I even got there, we had talked about the plan. I asked him, would it be okay if we stopped off at a store? Because there's no way that I could fly with a tub of butter, a tub of honey, or rice with me. I'm flying on an airplane. So I asked if we could stop at a store on our way there so I can pick up a couple of things to bring to the feast, or bring them some wine, because I heard the sisters like wine. And he said, yeah, he agreed. So I brought money with me, and plus I was getting paid while I was going to be out there, so it wasn't a problem. And so we're driving out there. Mind you, I paid for some of the gas, and I paid for everybody to eat breakfast twice. I got donuts at the gas station, and then we stopped off at Burger King, and I bought everybody who wanted food, in all, I think it was 2 cars. I brought us food and I brought them food, and he didn't spend a dime. But anyway, so we're driving down there, and I asked Ashley, Sister Ashley texted me and said, they just posted a list saying that they need butter, that they're running out. I told Tatum, I said, hey, can we stop here and get butter? He was like, nah, they don't need that. I was like, Ashley just texted me. Well, I just talked to him, and he said that they don't need anything. I'm like, okay. So I wasn't even able to stop off to get anything from the store like we had already initially planned. So I pretty much came to the feast empty-handed and felt really bad about that. And the money that was given to him was supposed to go to Pastor, and I don't even know if that happened. But there's just so, it's like, where do I even begin to tell you about all of the terrible experiences? I guess since we're talking about road trips, we took a road trip out to South Carolina because Tatum, this was the first road trip before I went to Tennessee with him. I've only encountered this man and was in person with him 3 times. But in those 3 visits, there were days within those visits that we got to spend together. And each time I started seeing things that just troubled my soul so much. But in between those times, we talked on the phone like 20 times a day, if more, if not more, video chats, nothing but phone calls. But again, I'll get into that later. But we drive down to South Carolina. I flew to him to Chicago, and then he picks me up from the airport because this was his big secret trip. Nobody was supposed to know about it, even though he didn't tell me that. But before I even get into that, I have to talk about how he swore me to secrecy about our relationship, because that's a big part of this whole thing and why it all started crumbling down. After we had gotten married, I was sworn to secrecy that I'm not to tell anybody about our relationship, and he used his kids as an excuse as to why I shouldn't tell them or say anything, or why it shouldn't come out because it would hurt them. And because I love children, I was a child once and was hurt by things too, so I didn't want to be that person to damage them, so I agreed to it. But then it started coming out later that he didn't want his wife to know about me. So instead, he started using me and using this whole, oh, I'm going to find an Esther. Oh, I have an Esther. And I end up changing my name on Facebook to Esther. And he started using that to taunt her. All the while I'm thinking that they're already getting a divorce, so why would she even care if he has another wife, or if he's marrying someone else and she's not part of being in this culture or in this lifestyle or trying to be supportive and trying to change. Like, why does it even matter? So I was charged to not ever speak to her, to not say anything to her about it, and it'll come out when it's time. So I agreed to that, and then all the while he's still using me. So when it comes to this South Carolina trip, prior to, like, right before the trip came, I confided, in a sister. It was Brother Samuel's wife, my sister Ashley. I confided in her and finally told her that we were married. And I only did it because of a certain situation that she was dealing with, and I wanted to relate to her because she was the only sister in the fellowship that was actually married and experienced being rebuked or actually being corrected by a husband, and the rest of the sisters couldn't relate to her. So she's pouring her soul out to me, and I was like, you know what, sis, I understand because I get rebuked a lot. And I came out and I told her, and while she already knew because she said it was kind of obvious, it got back to Tatum that I had told her, and I got in a lot of trouble for that. I got yelled at and rebuked for it, and it wasn't a fun time, but she was the one person that I confided in. So fast forward to our trip to South Carolina. He never, I mean, I already knew that I wasn't supposed to tell anybody in the church or like the sisters or anything because it was a secret trip. I was flying there. He picked me up from the airport, and then we drove down to South Carolina because he was supposed to record the toddler tunes with Sister Shalea and Brother Brandon. And on our way down to the trip, I'm texting with Sister Ashley, and I was excited. Like, I'm so excited that I get to meet Sis Shalea and I get to meet other saints because I haven't met anybody yet but him. So I was really excited. And when he found out, like, I just told him that I told her. I didn't think that it was supposed to be a big secret since she had already known that we were married. And then the last 2 hours of the trip, he spent yelling at me, and I'm just crying. Like, I didn't know that this was, like, I wasn't supposed to say anything to her. I guess I was just supposed to know not to say anything to anybody, period. But I had thought that he told the brethren because they knew. He told me that he had told Brother Samuel and Crispy Hugh that I was his wife, and that everybody knew about his trip, and I thought that he had told them that I was going with him. So I didn't know that it was like top secret. But when I told him that she knew that I was with him, he got very, very, very upset and just yelled and screamed at me the entire way there. But a part of me bringing up this trip is to just talk about his character and just how poor it is. We go to these saints' house, and the whole purpose of this trip was for him to record songs for the album for the Tiny Tots, or the Toddler Tunes, excuse me. And in doing so, while we're driving out there, he's like, you know what? I'm probably going to see if these sisters can sing on my album. That way I don't have to pay a singer in Chicago to do it, and I can just get it done for free here. That's what we're supposed to do. Like the saints, we all help each other, and this is networking. This is my leverage. As he always referred to things when he got a come up from a saint as leverage. And I never really understood that, but that is something that he always talked about. And so we go down there. He probably takes maybe a day, if even that, to record Sis Shalea singing her songs, and then he used the rest of the time to get his album done. And them sisters, they labored for hours, full days, singing for him for his I Got Some Truth album. And then something that he doesn't even talk about and won't even mention is the fact that I helped him with some of the songs. I was on one of the songs with him, with the sisters. He let me sing, and then I was the one that gave him the idea to have Brother Brandon rap, because Brother Brandon sent us his it was a link that had his music on it, and we listened to it when we were driving out there, and I was like, you know what, it'd probably be really dope if you put Brother Brandon on one of your songs. And then he was like, nah, I don't really listen to rap like that. I don't like rap. That's not my scene. I'm like, but there's so many Israelites that are young that this can reach. It can reach more than the the 30 to 40-year-old age group and higher that listen to your music. And so when we get down there, he ends up asking Brother Brandon, then now you have I Got Some Truth with a rap on it. And then he won't even mention how I helped him change some of the lyrics to that song because it just sounded retarded. But no, you don't hear about that. He wants to get on Pastor Dow for copyright issues. Like, let's really get down to the nitty gritty and be technical with it. Your page should be flagged by several people because you have people, and straightway you have their community, you have the people that labored, who made your music video, who helped you edit your songs and helped you even get exposure. Like, what is it that's within you that will cause you to flag Pastor Dow's channel, and that's the channel that gave you a platform? Without that channel, people wouldn't even know who you were. All the 53,000 people that subscribe to him, do you know how many souls that is coming into this way because of his channel? It's not even about Pastor Dow. If anything, it's about the Father. So you doing that just shows whose side you're really on, and that's Satan. And if you can't see it, you're far more deceived and far gone than anybody could ever even imagine. So that's food for thought. But anyway, I have so much more to go through, and it's almost as if it's going to take an hour for me to come out with all of this stuff. So I apologize. That's the video cutting off, but I'm back. So back to a part of his character that I wanted to talk about when I brought up the South Carolina trip. This is just how downright dirty this dude is. Like, these saints brought us into their home. They offered up their home for us and gave us their living room, said, we don't have much, but please come in. You can stay here. We'll cook for you. They offered us everything. And because he didn't like how the sister cooked, he wanted me to cook all the meals. Because they didn't have a whole lot of furniture, because like a good Hebrew brother, Brother Brandon works his ass off and saves all of his money to go into building for the community that they're starting. So their house was nice, it was clean, it just didn't have a whole lot of furniture, and he made fun of them for that. And it was like, no, we need to stay in a hotel, I need some privacy. That's really how he explained it. But no, he was really going in on how they chose to live, how the sacrifices that they made for the bigger picture, and he was going in on it. I complimented the sister and her voice. Like, I couldn't believe when I heard Sis Shalea's voice. I've never heard anybody sing like that in person. You hear music, you hear singers, blah, blah, blah. But her voice to me was like silk, and I couldn't believe it. So I'm like, you know what? I wish I had a voice like hers, because I like to think that I can kind of sing. But no, when I heard Sis Shalea, I'm like, no, I can't sing. But when I was telling him, I'm like, oh my goodness, her voice is so beautiful, I wish I had her voice. He made a comment like, well, then you would have to have her looks too. And then I just sat there like, why would you say that? Like, of course, I wasn't going to correct him. I wasn't going to try to argue with him over it, but it didn't sit right with me, because she was so beautiful and her spirit was so meek and so quiet, and she just wanted to help me do anything that she could. Even though she was in there for hours singing her ass off, she would come out and see if I wanted help with any cooking or wanted to clean up or just anything. And then she was giving me spiritual advice. She was encouraging me, and it was like, why would you like look at her and then think that? Like, why are you looking at another man's wife anyway? But as a pastor, why would you make comments like that? It didn't sit right with me for him to be talking bad about their home, for him to be making comments about or trying to make jokes about her looks, or comparing her looks to mine. Like, oh, if you want to sing that nice, then you're gonna have to look like her too. Like, and it bothered me a lot. And that was the first time I met him, I had my reservations. There were things that didn't sit right with me. So this is the second encounter that I had with him in person. And it was just like, who is this person that I married? Like, this is so different from what I'm seeing, the examples that are being put out from Straightway just online alone. Him in person, it was just, it was very troublesome. So I end up going back home after all those, I had a lot of great experience there, but I also had some things that just really didn't sit right with me, and other things that I won't mention just because it's not appropriate. But you can use your imagination. I go back, and then here comes Tabernacles. It's almost, I think, maybe a month or so. I'm not sure exactly the time duration between the two, but here comes Tabernacles. And that's the trip that really broke the camel's back. So to start, he and his wife had got into a fight because it came out that she had committed adultery on him twice. This is her second time. The first time he told me it was with somebody that they both knew in the church. And the second, he said he forgave her or whatnot. She swore up and down that she didn't really do anything with this guy, but he didn't believe that. So what he told me was that she cheated on him. The second time was right before Tabernacles. It was literally the day before I was leaving Utah to fly out there. He told me that she had been going out with this guy who had a wife, and his wife reached out to him and told him that his wife is a whore and that he needs to know what she's doing and blah blah blah. So he went ballistic, went crazy. And so I'm flying into Chicago. Mind you, before this trip even came up, I asked if it'd be okay if I got my own hotel because I didn't feel comfortable staying at his house, especially because there was only one bedroom for me, which was his room, and his children were there that didn't know about me. I didn't feel comfortable sleeping in his bed that he shared with his wife. And can I please pay for a room? He told me no. He said, I will take the couch and you can take my room. And it felt so uncomfortable, but can I argue with my husband? No, so I didn't. Even though I asked and didn't want to, I still abided by what he told me to do. So I come there. She was very upset that I was there, didn't want to meet me. Understandable. I didn't really care about that. But when I got to his house, I couldn't believe my eyes. I talked about this in my previous videos about how disgusting and deplorable the conditions were. But it almost, I'm not going to say it's because I'm a super clean person with OCD, because that does, it is true. I don't have OCD, but I'm a very clean person. But when I got there, it was disgusting. I wouldn't have my children or my mother or myself living in a house like that. It had not been cleaned in I don't know how long. There was just dirt that was petrified, like, everywhere. Okay, I already talked about that. Go to my other video and watch it if you want to hear. But he ended up trying to stay in the room that I was staying in, and his mother's room was right next door, and I felt so uncomfortable. I didn't want to give in to anything that he was asking of me as his wife, and he got very upset about it and threw a temper tantrum, stormed out of the room, and I saw a side of him that I have never seen in my life. But he was so upset that I did not want to be intimate with him because of the situation that he had put me in, that he stormed out of the room and started saying, oh, I see who you really are now you're showing me who you really are. And this was the day before that we were supposed to leave to Straightway. I had flown in. I didn't get any sleep. This was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Mind you, my flight was at 5 in the morning, so I had to be up at like 4. And I got to Chicago around, because I had a layover. So I got to Chicago, or did I have a layover? I don't remember, but I do remember I didn't get any sleep before I left. I remember taking a flight that was kind of early, and it took a while for me to get to Chicago. And he picked me up. It was around the afternoon. It was kind of getting dark. And I noticed that he was lying. It was the little things that I started noticing too. He lied to the person to get out of the parking lot. He said that he had only been there for 20 minutes and that he lost his ticket, but he was there all day because he took his mother to the airport to go stay with his brother. And he said, instead of driving to and from, I'm just going to stay here at the airport, and then I'll wait for you, and then we can go straight to South Carolina. So he stayed at the airport in the morning, picked me up in the evening. It was the evening because we did our road trip. No, he took me back to his house. It was the afternoon. I'm confusing both of my trips, so forgive me. But He picks me up, we leave the parking structure, and he tells them that he lost his ticket. So he didn't even pay, he only paid like $5 instead of like the 25. I'm like, I would have given you the money if you didn't have it. And then he was just like, that's just what we do out here. Like it was just no big thing for him to lie like that. But anyway, so after I fly in, I'm exhausted, didn't get any sleep. I ended up cooking dinner for him that night, and it was about, I'm going to say, I went to sleep or tried to go to bed at around 11, but because I was in his house, I was uncomfortable. I didn't sleep very well. He went upstairs to go work on his music and then came back down at maybe 1 or 2 o'clock and tried to wake me up. And you can imagine why he tried to wake me up, but I said, I'm really tired. I don't feel comfortable. And we have to leave at 5. We have to wake up at 5. Like, I at least want to get a little bit of sleep before we get to the straightway. And so he got very upset with me and stormed out of the room and threw a temper tantrum and actually slept in the living room because I had denied him that night. So I'm driving, and then because that happened, I still didn't end up getting any sleep because of how uncomfortable the situation was. So I already am a little irritable and just troubled by what I'm experiencing. We end up driving down the straightway. And then when we get there, just seeing this man compared to the men and comparing him to Pastor Dow, and just no matter what, when you see people that are supposed to be in the same position, how can you not notice drastic differences like that? I didn't notice a difference with the elders or with Pastor Corey and Pastor Dow. I noticed that they reverenced him and that they honored him as being their head, as being their pastor also. But I still saw a commonality in Elder Rufus. I saw a commonality in Pastor Corey and the elders and the older men that were surrounding Pastor Dow, and that were even his own father. Like, I just saw something that was common in all of them. And then here I see Tatum just standing off to the side, like, how do you even fit into this? It's totally two different manners of life. So two different manners of men. And then I couldn't hold it anymore. I couldn't contain myself with the grief that I felt. Like, what did I get myself into? And especially because I was taking care of his mother, and she was even telling me stuff about him and telling me about her own experiences living under his house and how his wife treated her and how his children, like, she loved her grandchildren, don't get me wrong, but she talked about how they didn't even want to help her, and she had a stroke and couldn't even barely walk on her own, and she can't see that well. And it was a lot. It was a lot to take in. And the things that he tried to get me to do while I was on the land during the feast, I knew it was wrong. It felt wrong. It's like, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Or like, is this okay? He ended up saying, you know what? This is what the brothers come here for. He even told me one night that it was the night where they did the fireworks and had like a little concert outside. After everybody got done in the dining hall, they started setting up out in the front, and I was giving Mother Tatum a bath. She hadn't bathed since we got there, so I gave her a bath, and that took maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I just spent some time with her and Pastor Dow's mother. And when I came out, I had missed Tatum on the stage singing. And then he told me that he wanted me to go to bed with him and that he did not want me out at night because this is when the brothers start to drink and this is when they get drunk and get horny. And those were his words. So I had to go to sleep with him, and this was at around 9 o'clock. I had to go to sleep with him in the tent. Mind you, he fell asleep like that because that's just, I don't know, he has a superpower where he can just sleep anywhere at any time. And I'm laying down in my bed listening to all these songs. I hear all the saints praising the Father, worshiping the Father. Then I hear fireworks. I just hear this amazing celebration that I couldn't partake in. Instead, I'm laying in my tent and I hear a symphony of sleep apnea and chronic flatulence. I heard, and I started crying. I just lay there in my bed crying because I missed everything. I didn't get to experience Straightway the way that it should be experienced. Although I did get to see things and I witnessed and experienced deliverance. I got to experience pastor preaching in person. I got to go to a Shabbat service. I still experienced Straightway to the point where it changed me and it changed my life and it caused me to want to walk and strive more, and it caused me to take a look at myself. But I still missed out on the experience of keeping a feast to the Most High Yah. I didn't, and it was really sad for me. I mean, I was happy that I gained, or at least I thought at the time that I gained a relationship with his mother, because we did bond at that time. But the rest of the trip, just having to sleep in his tent with him, which I didn't even want to do. I asked if I can get my own tent because I didn't feel comfortable. But he said, no, I'm staying in his tent. And his children were out in the front. His two sons came. They put their tents in front of ours. It was probably 20 feet in front of us. And I'm like, I thought they weren't supposed to know about me. Like, they're going to see me coming in and out of your tent. And he just didn't even care. And I was just so uncomfortable. But that's just a part of him being who he is, careless and reckless, and selfish. So I say all of that just to give you guys more of an understanding on why I came to this emotional breakdown, because of all that I had been encountering with this man. I didn't grow spiritually at an ounce. If anything, I fell more into a depression than I had ever experienced in my life. So what was my last straw was on the last night. We were leaving the next morning because the temperatures had dropped so low. I had started feeling a little sick. On top of, I wasn't sleeping well. It was hard to sleep with him in a tent. Trust me, it was terrible. I wasn't eating a lot, and I was running around a lot helping with Mother Tatum and doing all that I could to be of assistance to her and to him. I had to serve him and whatever. So I was doing all of that, and I started feeling really sick, especially because it got really cold at night. And he got me a $10 blow-up mattress from Walmart that did not stay inflated. So I was pretty much sleeping on the cold ground. And he had experienced Straightway several times, and I was totally unprepared. He got me one sleeping bag. So I had gotten really sick, and he was like, let's go sleep in the car and I'll turn on the heat for you. So I'm laying in the car and I'm trying to sleep. It was very uncomfortable, but I'm trying to sleep. And then here he comes trying to, again, trying to, you know, I don't even want to say it, but I had denied him because I was on the verge of throwing up. I started feeling like I was getting a fever, and he got upset with me again. And at that point, I just couldn't wait to leave. I didn't want to leave the land. I actually wanted to stay, but I wanted to be away from him. So I really couldn't wait to leave the next morning. So we leave, or we're about to leave the next morning. I'm full blown sick that day. I really felt like I was, had a fever. I was on the verge of throwing up. That didn't happen until after we were on the road trip. And then I had a really bad it felt like a really bad stomach flu. So we're on the road, we're driving back, and he wouldn't stop calling. Mind you, there was a brother in his church, Brother Samuel, as you guys know. He gave Pastor, let me stop calling him pastor. He gave Tatum money that was supposed to be given to my brother and myself that were supposed to help with our travel costs. Because Tatum told me that he was going to take care of my cost of getting there and back, which he didn't. I ended up covering it myself. He gave my brother $60. Come to find out recently, Brother Samuel told me that he gave him a lot more than that. So I ended up paying for majority of our trip back. I paid for the hotel room because I had to stop. I couldn't go that whole trip being that sick. And so he kept calling me and kept calling me. And when we got home maybe around 10 or 11, 2 days after we left Straightways. It was a 2-day trip. And as sick as I was throwing up all over the place. We had to stop every, I'd say, 20, 40, sometimes 40 to 60 miles so I can go to the bathroom where I can throw up. I was just so sick. And When I finally got home, I really just wanted to lay in my bed and try to get better because I had to go back to work in just a couple of days. So he kept calling me and kept calling me, and he would call me to say, "Hey, how are you doing? Are you feeling better?" I'm like, "No, I'm still very sick. I'm trying to get rest." So we'd hang up. Oh, and then he would start venting about his wife and being upset with her because prior to us leaving, he was upset that she was committing adultery again. So they were arguing. And so he would call me to check on how I'm doing. And then immediately after I told him I'm still sick, he would start going in and telling me more about his wife and their conversations and arguments. I would be just staying silent on the phone, just so fed up with it that when we hung up, he called me back like an hour later after we had just got done talking and I'm still trying to sleep. And I finally snapped, but I said it as nice as I could. I said, Tatum or John, can you please stop calling me? I'm really sick and I just want to sleep. Like, you keep calling to see if I'm feeling better. It's only been an hour. No, I feel the same. And it's really grievous to hear you talk about your wife so much. Like, I just want to relax and get rest. And then he got upset and then hung up the phone. And then a couple of hours later, he calls me again to rebuke me for telling him to stop calling me. So I'm sick, and then he's rebuking me and getting upset. And then I just finally had that moment where I said, you know what, we need to have a conversation. I really feel like we rushed into things. I'm not happy. I've been experiencing a lot of things that I'm not very happy about, that are very troublesome to me, and I've been holding it in, and I really think that we should talk about this. So as I'm trying to talk to him and explain to him the things that I had been experiencing, he wouldn't let me get a word in. He kept interrupting me. He kept changing the subject. He kept making excuses, and then he kept placing blame on me for the things that he was doing. So because I wasn't able to get a word in, I ended the phone call, and then I said, you know what? I'm just going to send him an email, because us going back and forth on the phone, he's not listening. I'm not being heard. I really need to express these concerns. So I ended up writing him a long email, and then he writes me a or he writes me back, and then he starts, he denied just about everything that I said I had experienced, and then turned it around on me, and then started talking bad about me, and then ends up telling me that, oh, well, me and Joan just got back together. And I said, that's great. Can you give me a bill of divorcement? I'm happy that you're back with your wife. I didn't want to be with you anyway after experiencing all of this. So can you please just give me a bill, and then you guys can go on your merry way. And I said, and please don't forget to tell her about me, so you don't go into your newly found marriage with lies. And so he actually did tell her about me, but instead of telling her the truth, he flipped the entire story on me and told her that I try to get at him, that I was seeking to take her place, that I try to be a mother to her children, that I wanted to be the only wife, the first and only wife. He told her that I was pretty much, he made it seem like I was really just his whore, because she then starts calling me and she starts texting me and she starts saying things to me that really set me over the edge. I didn't respond with my emotions either, because old Lala would have got on the plane and flew down there and handled it face to face, because that's where I grew up. But me being who I am, I'm like, can you just listen to my side of the story? All the things that he told you is a lie, and I can prove it. I have our correspondence. I have all of our text messages. I have everything. He told her that I was sending him all these pictures of me, and then I was trying to seduce him, and the only time I had ever sent him any pictures was at his request. But he just started throwing me under the bus and making it seem like that I was really just trying to take her place, and how I wanted her out the picture. And then she was just texting me and calling me, and I was all kinds of bitches. I was all kinds of whores, and I knew you were trying to steal my man, and you were trying to steal my husband and take my place. And I have all the text messages, so if they want to deny it, it ain't nothing for me but to pull out everything and show you guys that I'm not lying about any of this. And so since she wasn't willing to hear me out, I told him that I was going to reach out to Pastor Dow. Tatum stepped in and said, no, don't do that. I will handle it. I'll tell her to stop messaging you. And I was like, you know what? the way that this is all going, I don't want to be a part of your union with her. Even if you want to keep me as a wife, we didn't do this right. We did it out of order. When I'm looking at Straightway and learning from Straightway, there's supposed to be a time where you're betrothed to each other, and there's a time where you get to know one another to know if this is what you want to do. I didn't even know what my role was supposed to be as his wife. Not only looking at the example of Straightway did I realize that he wasn't in a position to be a husband to a second wife, but I wasn't in a position to be a wife, not just to a man, let alone a pastor. So I felt that I was cheated out of a time of really getting to know my role as a daughter of Zion before I was placed in a role of being somebody's wife in this way. So I asked him to give me a bill of divorcement. And he was just unwilling to do it. He didn't want to. He wanted to keep me as a wife. He was saying, you were so good to me. I don't want to have to, I don't want, you just want to be with another brother. And I wasn't thinking about anybody else at that point. I really just wanted to be by myself and really focus on my walk with the Father. But he really thought that I wanted to be with Pastor Dowell. He thought that I wanted to be with other men in the ministry because when I went to Straightway, he saw all the brothers on the land and thought that I wanted to be with them. He thought there was somebody else, but I'm like, there really isn't anybody that I'm talking to or even looking at on that level. I just want out of this situation. And so he told me that he was going to give me a bill. And then he'd go back the next day and said, I can't do it. I said, okay, if you're going to keep me as a wife, if you're not willing to put me away, can we talk to Pastor Dowell about this so we can get some guidance on this whole situation? Because this is ridiculous. I'm not going to be joined to you and be in a situation with this woman with how she's treating me and with what she thinks that I am to you. Like, she wouldn't even admit that I was his wife. She thought that I was just like a mistress or I was just less than a concubine. But according to her, I was just a whore. And so I asked several times, can we speak to Pastor Dowell? And he said, I will talk to Pastor Dowell and I will get some guidance and some counsel on what to do with this situation. And so here comes the debate. Originally, I was supposed to go with Tatum to go see the debate between Pastor Dowell and Roberts. But he ended up taking his wife instead, and because his wife was there, he didn't call me, he didn't text me the entire trip. So I didn't talk to or see him for at least 4 days because they drove out there. So he completely ignored me the entire time, and I'm just trying to get answers as to what's going on. And so when he did that, I didn't even want to talk to him anymore. I said, you know what, I'm done. I just need my space for a minute. And so he ends up trying to text me and call me when he got back. I talked to him once or twice, and every time I talked to him, he was driving in his car. She was nowhere to be around. It was just, he would rush the conversation because he was out running an errand. When I went to the store with my brother, he called while we were there. I said, can you call me in about 15 minutes because I'm shopping? He said, can't you just go to the corner so we can talk for a minute? And I said, no. Like, you can call me in 15 minutes. He never called me back. He called me the next day when she was at work. So he was going behind her back to have these conversations with me. When she was around, he was acting like I didn't even exist. So he ended up trying to talk to me again, and I just stopped talking to him altogether because of how messed up the situation was. And so he kept texting, kept calling. Then he started calling my brothers and trying to convince them to convince me to talk to him and that I was tripping. And so I heard the conversation that he had with my brother, and he was telling my brother, because I told him, you know what, I'm going to Pastor Dowell with this. That was the last thing I said to him. So after I said that, he had been trying to call me and text me and call me and text me, but I wasn't picking up any of his calls. I was literally in my bed, depressed and just on the verge of just not even wanting to be here anymore. Because throughout the duration of our relationship, he kept talking about how Pastor Dowell is, how Pastor Dowell loves him the most out of everybody, and I'm his favorite, and blah, blah, blah. So although I wanted to call Pastor Dowell and talk to him about it, I was kind of scared to because of how he made me think that Pastor Dowell thought of him. So he told my brother that Pastor was going to be very upset with me if I called him and got him involved in this. And when I heard the desperation in his voice when he was talking to my brother to try to convince me not to go with Pastor Dowell, I knew in my spirit that I had to reach out to Pastor Dowell in that moment. I wasn't scared anymore for some reason. Like, I just heard a desperation in him that really didn't want me to reach out to Pastor because he knew what was going to come. So when I heard that, I contacted a brother that got me in touch with Elder Rufus. I contacted Elder Rufus and he got me in touch with Pastor Dowell. I told Pastor Dowell everything. I sent him all the text messages, all the emails. I offered up access to my Facebook so he could read through the messages. I sent him Jones messages to me. I had receipts for all the money that was sent to him. I gave him everything, and Pastor Dowell didn't react out of haste. He actually took his time and looked through everything that I gave him, and he spoke to Tatum about it. And before even coming to his righteous judgment, he actually took the time to go through all the information that I gave him, and I'm sure he prayed about it, and now we are where we are. He tried to talk to Tatum about it, and he pretty much gave him a judgment that Tatum wasn't willing to do. And that's not for me to go into. There's a whole recording that Tatum admits to a lot of this. There's a recording where Tatum admits to treating me treacherously because he turned the tables on me and made his wife think that I was somebody that I wasn't. There's just a whole thing that a lot of you guys, majority of you, have no idea about when it comes to Tatum and what he really did and the part that his wife played in all of this. And I know a lot of you see them online right now. You see Joan, the main one in these forums, that are bashing Pastor Dowell. But last I checked, Joan, you weren't called to be a warrior to fight your husband's battles. You were called to be a keeper at home. You were called to be a daughter of Zion. You were called to teach your own children how to be keepers at home and to love the Father. But instead, they're looking at your example of being an internet gangster that ain't really about nothing but hiding behind a keyboard. I suggest that you really take this time to repent to the Father, and maybe he'll give you back your hairline. Maybe he'll bless you and heal your wound, or maybe he'll do the things that are really needful to your soul, because what you're doing right now is you're storing up wrath unto the day of wrath. All the things that you're typing on the internet, all these little comments that you're making about our pastor, you act as if you're not going to have to give account for it one day. And it shows that you really have no fear of the Father before your eyes, because you don't even fear to slander against his anointed. And then as for everybody else, what I find really sad is that it wasn't the Father and the love for the Father that united you. It was a hatred for a man who is doing something that none of you guys can do. All of your efforts, all of your talents and everything combined still doesn't even match up to what Pastor is doing on his own. All the communities that are coming up through Straightway, all the blessings that are coming upon Pastor, none of your slander is stopping any of it. All the slander is not stopping people from coming to Straightway. Actually, we've heard testimonies of people being brought to the ministry through your slander. So if anything, you should really think about the fact that you guys are only joined together on a mutual hate for a man, instead of being joined together in the likeness of the Spirit and the likeness of the way you think. You guys don't agree upon anything. You all believe different things when it comes to this Bible, and the only thing you guys can really agree about and come together on is your hate for Pastor Dowell. Now, if that's not pathetic, there's nothing else that can be said. But anyway, I hope that this video brought clarity. I hope that it cleared up some confusion, and that you can really understand why Tatum is so bitter, why he's so angry, why he's so envious and jealous of Pastor. Just clearly, all you have to do is put a picture of them side by side, and that'll speak for itself. Shalom, the King is coming.